Welcome to Conversations with Epiphany. Let's talk, the show where we dive deep into the essence of what makes our guests uniquely themselves. Join as we uncover the stories, experiences, and moments that shape their lives. From the triumphs to the trials, we're here to explore it all. Let's get talking and discover the heart of every story.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Epiphany. Let's chat. I'm so honored to be here with my guest, Simone Jameson, who is a journalist. Simone, how are you doing today?
I am doing so well, Epiphany. Thank you so very much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for being here. I'm happy that you are here. And, what first inspired you to pursue a career of journalism, and how did you get your start in telling stories?
I would say what enabled me to get my start in journalism, well, first of all, it happened when my interest was from, I was a little girl. I was a little kid. I was always that person asking questions, so many questions, asking the teachers questions, asking my friends questions, and they thought I was nosy. Folks really thought I was nosy. And then I talked a lot and I was very inquisitive. Mm-hmm. And all those characteristics kind of served me in developing my role as a journalist, because all throughout my life, even growing up, my parents, everyone around me, teachers, etc., were like, well, you ask a lot of questions, you're very curious, and you have a great voice for on air. And so have you ever thought about being a news reporter? Have you ever thought about being a television personality? And first I was led to radio. And so I was actually a radio personality for a good bit. For a few years, I did online radio before I made my transition into television news. And so that's kind of how it started for me. Just that constant curiosity and wanting to speak with as many people as I could, hear their stories, and be the voice for the voiceless.
Right. And I know it's a running joke that says all the kids who had talked too much on their report cards or anything like that. Like, what career are they in right now? Right.
Exactly.
And it's something with talking.
And I was always the one that was not paying attention or not on task.
Yeah.
Because I was busy with so many other things in my head. So many
questions. Yes. And like you said, being a journalist, it takes you around to so many different places. So having worked in several different regions, South Georgia, South Carolina, and Cincinnati, how have those locations shaped your perspective as a journalist?
I would say I've gotten a very well-rounded perspective as a journalist, being in the South as well as the Midwest. I would say there's a lot of different stories to uncover, a lot of different people to meet. And I feel like the cultures and the food and everything else that I took in from those places was so uniquely different. In Jonesboro and working in South Georgia was a little bit more of a hustle for me, because those were smaller markets. Those were smaller regions where I had to really work hard to connect with people and get their stories out there and tell them well and really sort of make a name for myself and do really good work. And so once I did that for years, and then going to Columbia, just further built on that, and then going to Cincinnati, it was a bit of a challenge because it was my first time living in the Midwest. It was really super duper cold. I'm from New York originally, and people say, oh, well, you should be used to the cold. And it's like, because I'm used to it doesn't mean I like it.
Right, something you never get used to,
I don't get used to it. My family's Jamaican. We have island blood, so I prefer warm weather by nature.
Right,
but I would say from Cincinnati to Columbia, and even where I am now, Greenville, South Carolina. It's just really all opened my eyes to the different type of people and different type of backgrounds and cultures that I've had to cover. Some topics I've had to be really sensitive about, and just really use some grace and really use discernment, and in other cases a sort of different approach.
Right.
So I feel like it's helped me to really be well-rounded as a journalist and really kind of keep the hustle going. and but really catered to all different people of all different backgrounds.
Right. And that's important to know how to cater, like you said, to each background that you're talking to or having to tell their story with. Because I'm a firm believer, like, you're gonna meet a lot of people, and a lot of people you're probably not gonna have the same shared like interest or the same shared like belief system, but you still like their story is still worth being told. So as a Black woman in journalism, what are some of the challenges you faced in your career?
As a Black woman in journalism, as a minority in journalism, I faced discrimination. I felt at times I was sort of edged out or pushed out or overlooked, per se, that my hard work was overlooked as opposed to my peers that are not minorities. And so then I found myself working a little bit harder to be seen, to be heard, to make the voices of the viewers that I was trying to tell the stories of heard, and really work 4 times as hard to be in the same place, to be in the same space. And at times that got very challenging, that got very frustrating.
Right.
And so I found myself fighting to get opportunities, to anchor, to really do the things that I wanted to do with previous stations that I'd worked in. And so now I'm thankful and I'm grateful that I'm finally in a place where I'm not having to fight as hard.
Right.
Because I had fought tooth and nail. I'm trying to show up for myself and trying to get those opportunities for myself. So I would say discrimination as a minority, and then a bit of sexism as well as a woman, coming up against men in some of these roles, coming on to me very inappropriately. Some of them making inappropriate comments about me, about my body. That has happened in the past. And so I would say those have been some of the biggest challenges. But luckily, I have a very strong support system with my family, my faith in God, and just been able to lean on them and kind of air out my frustrations or whatever I'm dealing with them, and them helping me to regroup, to reconnect. I also meditate, and I also journal.
Right.
So that helps in terms of getting whatever frustrations that I have out. And I used to do that a lot in the past, not so much now.
Right.
Since I'm in a really healthy place.
Right.
But it was
very
difficult.
Yes, because at a time, like you say, prioritizing self-care is very important. It's to just like your own mental health. And I know, like you said, within your workplace, facing discrimination and things like that. Also, outside of the workplace, where cyberbullying, where anybody can be whoever they want to be behind a phone, a computer, what have you. How have you handled situations where you were cyberbullied? Yeah. And what helped you navigate those challenges?
You are getting into it. You are peeling back some scabs for me right now. I'm like, oh, wow. But I'm happy to get into it with you. I actually, as a public figure, I did not think I would get as attacked as I have been in the past. As I would come across a little comments about myself on social media in some places, folks talking about everything about me, from my hair to my complexion, to my on-air presence, to my voice. Some had ridiculed it for being deep. I'd been told I sound like a man. This, that, and the third. And that actually, Epiphany, my social media accounts have been hacked more than once.
Wow.
And it had been a headache.
Yeah.
To try and get them back.
Right.
Them.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, in a couple of different cases, folks, social media attacked what I've worn. what I've done in my personal time, going through my personal accounts and trying to see what they can dig up and say about me there.
Wow.
And I found the healthiest way to deal with them has been to not engage, to not read the threads, to not respond to the comments. And you hear Beyonce talk about this openly, that she'll see a picture of herself or something and she won't read the comments because sometimes they're so discouraging. I'll come across comments about me and I don't go into the threads. I don't read them. I delete them or I block the person, because I've even gotten messages on my professional pages from negative Nancy's, just looking to tear me down, just talk about my appearance or how I sound on air and this, that, and the third, and why are you working on TV, blah, blah, blah. And I just delete, block, and then I
like goodbye.
delete, block, deny. And then I go to my support circle, and then I go and just kind of woosah, and this just kind of, and then I go back to my center and I remind myself, you're amazing. You're great. You should realize why you've been doing this. You've been doing this for years now. You've been a TV journalist for years. Nobody can take that away from you.
Exactly. Like sometimes you just got to remind yourself who you are.
Remind yourself of who you are. Exactly. Who you are, and where those comments are coming from and who those people are. They're not anyone that's impacting my worth in any way, shape, or form. They don't know me personally. They're just, if anything, projecting their own hate and negativity onto somebody else. And just realizing that you really have to develop a thick skin in my industry and learn not to take things personally.
Like there's a famous saying would say, happy people ain't hating people. So, like that's one definitely.
Exactly. You probably heard the saying that hurting people hurt people. As well. So yes, misery loves company.
It does.
So, very true. I feel like a lot of the people that come for me in the comments on my social media are like that. That come 90% of the time I do get lots of positive messages. I would say 98% of the messages that I get are positive, which is a great thing. But you do have some of those, needs occasionally that you just have to kind of stomp out and be like, la la la,
exactly. Okay, you're not going to disturb my day. Exactly. So with, like you said, being a journalist and working in different regions, what is a story that stands out to you the most, one that was like impactful to you the most?
So I would tell you, Epiphany, very recently I had covered a story about more than 200 acres of land being burned to ashes, pretty much, in Western North Carolina. And it drew a lot of similarities to California wildfires blazing. Such a tragedy, so many people losing their lives and homes. But covered something similar in Western North Carolina. Fortunately, no one died, but there was a property that was damaged. And being able to go on scene and actually see the fire, see the flames, what was left, was just insane. It was there was so much smoke, and there was such big fires, and just being so up close to that was just like, wow. Well, I saw this on TV, the California wildfires, and heard other reporters cover it, but now I'm covering it. But now I'm covering something very similar, something a lot closer to me. So I would say that was a surreal moment. If you want me to recap kind of a happier story that I've told, and I still remember in when I was a reporter in Jonesboro, Arkansas, covering or chronicling the adventures of a two-headed rattlesnake
Oh my gosh. A two-headed. Oh my goodness.
This rattlesnake was found in the woods. I think it was a hunter or angler, somebody found this rattlesnake in the woods and ended up giving it to it ended up in a facility where people could research and students could follow along with its progress. And I got to chronicle it and follow it along as it grew.
Right. Wow. Oh,
it had two heads, and it would like hiss, and they would both hiss, and you'd see the head, one head trying to pull it this way, and the other trying to pull it this way. I don't know if they ever named it, but yeah, it was.
Wow.
I'd never seen anything like that before.
Yes,
I was
me
just like,
either.
whoa, how long is this thing gonna live? And it lived a little while.
Okay.
It did die, sadly, and I don't know that anybody named it. But
wow.
I think that was one of the first stories that I covered that actually it went viral.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Definitely two-head. Ooh. Lord, and I am afraid of animals. Like so, snakes are definitely like, oh my god, I'm definitely at the top of the scared list for me.
Yes, I did not do any personal handling of the snake.
Right, no
personal. Right, from a safe distance.
Yes, yes. So, which current event or trend do you think deserves the most coverage right now in media?
Yeah, I would say Epiphany. The current events, I think DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, kind of going away.
Right.
I think that's been getting a lot of attention. That's been the height of controversy lately, especially here in South Carolina. Some lawmakers have come up with a bill to make sure that DEI practices are completely scrapped. And those are diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Right.
Programs that focus on that. I don't believe it was just for minorities, but it was for people of different backgrounds, people who maybe had physical or psychological impairments or mental impairments.
Right.
Excluding them from certain spaces. It's definitely been a big kind of controversy. It's something that we've been following here with our news at my station very closely. And so we'll definitely be interested to see some of the repercussions of that. I know we had just ran a story in our newscast very recently, and I think one of the questions that was asked was, will women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses be affected by basically DEI, everything going away?
Exactly.
And the lawmaker did not answer that question. So it's going to be very interesting to see and continue to follow this. But I think it's something we definitely still need to keep an eye on, because we don't know what the long-term implications of something like that is going to be. Not having any more diversity, equity, and inclusion centers or meccas, really, in the U.S.
That's very important. I know a lot of companies have, changed their DEI policy and things like that. What do you think could be their long-term results of some companies deciding to cut their DEI, and maybe down the line, maybe a year or two down the line, they see like, oh, wow, this is not doing good for our business? Because at the end of the day, the bottom line, how do you see those companies faring out in the not so distant future?
Well, I'll tell you, Epiphany, it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be very interesting to watch, because we're talking about groups of people who were historically excluded from spaces, and those type of programs and those type of institutions were designed to help perpetuate them getting into those spaces. Exactly. And so then when you remove those barriers, I think it might make it more difficult for people of minority backgrounds, for women, for other classes, maybe to get into those same spaces that maybe men, non-color
Right.
Have already.
Mm-hmm.
And so so we're just kind of watching it, Epiphany.
Right.
It's
It
just
is. Yeah.
and
Like a
waiting
watch.
to see.
Yeah, like a wait and see type of game, you know?
Exactly.
That's so true. And speaking of like marginalized voices and communities, how do you feel like journalism can be more responsible for its coverage of different marginalized communities in the world?
Yes, absolutely, Epiphany. So I would say I feel like as a journalist, and me personally as a journalist, I have a responsibility to serve my community. I have a responsibility to ask tough questions and to be the voice for the voiceless of all the
Right,
voiceless,
right,
all the voices, really.
right.
And it doesn't matter their background
Hmm.
or where they come from or
Right.
what they have been through. If they have something tragic or something that shakes them up that they want to share, I feel like it is
Hmm.
my responsibility to share it. And I feel
Right,
like we all have a duty to, especially in our underserved communities, to get that word out and
right,
to help them to get the help that they need. And
right.
so I feel like it's just all of us being a little bit more mindful of maybe who's hurting a little bit more, who can use that helping hand a little bit more.
Mhm.
Not to say that we give anyone preferential treatment,
Right,
preferential treatment,
right.
but just looking at this in a lens of how can I help this person? How can I best get them the appropriate care and attention that they need and give the story the platform it deserves?
Exactly. Like, what is the best way that I can be of service with the resources that I have to help someone who may be in need? So, yep,
Exactly.
that's very true. Yes. So, what is your vision for the future of journalism, and where do you see yourself contributing in the coming years?
Yeah, so I think journalism has really changed, I feel like,
Mhm.
over the decades.
Right.
Because now we're living into this super
Mhm.
high tech digital space where stories are literally instantly at your fingertips,
Right.
either through social media or through the television. Well, especially through social media and
Right.
digital media. Sometimes, things are coming out so quickly,
Mhm.
you can't really kick up. You can't really, you know, you can't really keep on pace sometimes.
Right.
And with that epiphany, I feel like there's come a lot of misinformation.
Right. Mhm.
Um, and there's still the people that are like, "Oh, this is fake news, fake news."
Right. Yes.
I remember I used to. I
Yeah.
remember back when I was a reporter in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and people would come up to me and ask, "So, is this? Are you fake news or are you real news?" I'm like,
Right.
news. I'm honest news. Like
Right.
I'm just a local journalist trying to tell your
Exactly.
story. I'm not trying to
Right.
be dishonest.
Exactly.
I
Right.
think,
Exactly.
but
Like.
I feel like this day and age that we're in, when people have this information so accessible at their fingertips, and then they want the bite-sized versions too, like the
Right.
TikTok versions or the
Yes.
Snapchat story version. When
Exactly.
you have this much space to tell a
Exactly.
story, you maybe have
Right.
you can maybe get a point across in like two or
Right.
three sentences.
Exactly.
So everything is so bite-sized, and so it's
Mm.
really changed, and
Right.
it's changed the way that we've had to tailor our stories.
Mhm.
And so I've actually made it more of a point to tell my stories more in TikTok form, to where
Right.
I give them the meat and
Mhm.
potatoes
Mhm.
as much as I possibly can with that
Mhm.
in three sentences to make it
Exactly.
very punchy. And
Right.
so I feel like that's kind of the way journalism is headed
Mhm.
into this very digital space where people are
Right.
craving it and getting these bite-sized versions
Mhm.
nonstop, and us having to tailor to those folks.
To
And
those.
if you see it, Epiphany,
Mhm.
um, the viewership has
Mhm.
changed with news. You don't
Right.
have generations like us
Right.
I watch you really
Exactly. No.
anymore. You have
Not at all.
my parents and grandparents. There's
Exactly.
a loyal
I know. I
view.
think I'm the only person out of my friends. I watch I watch my local news. I do. I watch CNN. I watch I watch it all. And I think like out of my friend group, I'm pretty much like the one that keeps up with like regular scheduling. So like you said, it is changing in our generation. It's different, it's like, okay, well, I
Exactly.
know Piffy, she'll tell me something wrong or some like big breaking news or something like that. But like, this
So it's a really challenging time, I'll tell you,
Yes.
Tiffany, because you're fighting all that, you're fighting misinformation, and you're
Right.
fighting people, and you're coming across people who think they are journalists.
Exactly.
They go outside and they film something on their phone. It might be a crash or it might be
Mm,
something other significant event that they come across, and
yeah.
they
Mm,
grab that video and they post it online and it goes viral.
right. Yeah.
So and there's that propensity again for a whole lot of misinformation
Yeah.
and fear and speculation.
Right. It leaves like the door open for everybody to like. It's like
Exactly.
you don't have to freak out. There's nothing to freak out
Right.
about. It's with
And conspiracy theories, right?
Right.
So,
Yes, exactly. So I know I recently saw that you were before you decided you want to be in journalism, you were an extra in a movie. Still Magnolias is the new one with Queen Latifah and Alfred Woodard. And for those of you who don't know, but I watched that movie. I remember when it first came out on Lifetime. I was like, oh, and I remember the wedding scene. How was that for you? How did you even get to that point?
yeah, absolutely. So back once upon a time,
Mhm.
I thought I wanted to be a singer and actress. I didn't really ever explore that.
Mhm.
I was the lead singer in my choir
Okay,
at
yes.
one point in time.
Right,
So,
right.
and I
Yes.
did sing on the Steve Harvey morning show back when he had the singing talent show. And so
Really?
that was all around the same time when I thought,
Yeah.
oh, maybe I can make
Mhm.
it in,
Right,
singing, acting. We'll see where that takes
right.
me. And
Mhm.
back when Craigslist was
Mhm.
a thing, have you heard
Okay.
about Craigslist?
I've heard about it. Yeah.
I don't even know what it is right now
Right,
or if it's still
right,
around, but
right.
that was like a decade or so ago.
Yes.
Um, so I'd hopped on there,
Mhm.
and it was around the time where I wanted to do singing gigs,
Right.
acting gigs,
Mhm.
hosting gigs,
Mhm.
break into showbiz, that
Right.
whole bit.
Yeah.
And saw a casting on there,
Wow.
but it didn't come out and say Steel Magnolias, but it was audition for a role in a movie. And I thought, oh, okay.
Mhm. Right. Right.
And so I put my application in. I think I
Mhm.
submitted my photo and a little bio.
Right.
And I was like, hey, at the time I was living in Atlanta. I was
Mhm.
like, hey, I'm living in Atlanta. Would love to be a part of this production. And I really didn't even know what it was.
Right.
And then they called me back,
Mhm.
the casting director. And then there were
Mhm.
actually a couple of rounds of girls because they had
Mhm.
actually went through quite a few girls
Wow.
and had
Mhm.
to narrow down the pool. And I was one of the
Mhm.
finalists who made
Right.
it into that pool to actually be in this movie. And they said, oh,
Right.
well, it's a movie. By the way, it's a movie on Lifetime, Steel Magnolias,
Wow.
starring Queen Latifah,
Mhm.
Jill Scott, Alfred Woodard, Felicia Rashad. And I was like, what?
All-star cast, right? All-star, yes. Exactly.
I
Yes.
didn't know that. I didn't know that
Wow.
going into it. I just saw, oh, be in a movie.
Yes.
And I didn't know what movie, didn't
Wow.
know where the movie was going to be filmed. I was like, oh, well, sign me up. Looks cool.
Right, so yeah,
And then
right,
it
I
ended up being
know. Wow. Oh my gosh, I know that had to be such a beautiful, like, once you, like, really like, "Oh,
yeah,
okay."
and it was cool because we got the whole bit. I got hair, makeup, food,
Wow. Exactly, all the good stuff.
all the things. Yes. And I got
Right.
to meet the cast, Alfred Woodard,
Wow.
Felicia Rashad, so incredibly nice.
Wow.
Jill Scott, who
Yes.
was super cool,
Yes.
super chill as
Mhm.
well. It was great to meet all and be on set and work with all of them.
Right. Wow. Well, that is so good. And I know, you are really walking in your calling with journalism and what you're doing now. So, that is beautiful. And I'm so glad that you are here today with me. And I thank you all for joining into Conversations with Epiphany. Let's chat. And don't forget, it's never a wrong time to chat. Have a good one. Bye-bye.